All right, we are live. You all can start whenever you want.
Start in about 2 minutes.
Is Laura going to be here? Is she here?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess it won't hurt us to start a minute early. So let's call the meeting to order. Let me answer the question. Are there any council members not here? Is everybody here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. The first on the agenda, the first order of business of this regular council meeting of the city of Prospect on July 20th, 2020 is the approval of 4 sets of minutes. To save time, let me just ask if anyone has any additions or corrections to any of those 4 sets of minutes.
Yes.
Okay,
No.
hearing none.
Mayor, I was not available on July 14th, so I'm going to abstain from that one, but the others I agree on.
Okay, well, let's look at June 15th, 22nd, and July 7th. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Now, July 14th, Harold, what is it?
No, I was not there, so I'm going to abstain.
Move to accept.
Second.
Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we've got that done. My update on city matters. We have a long meeting tonight, so I'll be very brief. 2 things. I have no new news about any affordable housing projects. The LDG lawsuit attempting to overturn Metro Council's vote against them 3 years ago, now nearly 3 years old, just got a new judge. The judge who had the case recused herself, and so that's probably going to slow the case down even more. Next item, I just want to say that our police are checking every morning to ensure that work at the breakers doesn't start making noise until after 8 o'clock in the morning. Any questions?
Can you repeat that again, John? For some reason, I thought you cut out at one point there. I missed something.
Our police have been checking, excuse me, our police have been checking the breakers around 7:30, 7:40 every morning to make sure that there isn't any noise-making activity going on prior to 8 o'clock. I had a couple of complaints about that, and that seems to have cured it. I also had communications with Stephanie Gillazan about it, and we seem to have resolved that after a bit of haranguing around. So that's that story. Do you hear me, Randy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Committee reports, we had written reports from Parks and Recreation and also from the Forestation Board. Let me ask Linda if she has anything she wants to emphasize or stress or correct.
Yes, I would just like to reiterate that obviously, like everything else, this virus has affected the operations of the parks. The good news is we continue, as is detailed in my report, we continue to work on We also.
Linda, you're cutting out. You're cutting out. I'm only getting ever so many words.
Okay, I don't quite know what to do about that.
Well, just talk louder.
Yeah, and lean in more. Maybe that'll help. Thank
Closer
you.
to the microphone. Okay, we are continuing to do work in the parks. We are continuing to remove invasive plants. The good news is we have much increased usage in the parks, and a lot of people are discovering what they didn't know was right in the past. I did mention in the written report that the June 29th storm caused a significant amount of damage to the dam at Honey Pond and the canoe launch. I'm happy to report that the dam repairs were completed today. They are beginning repairs on the canoe launch. I have to say that Ron and his maintenance crew are doing an amazing job rescuing the portion of the boardwalk which floated away. They recovered that. We can reinstall that. They also have been clearing trees that have fallen and blocked the paths. We will be doing some rerouting of trails around trees that are too large for us to remove. And we have some other trail maintenance we will be working on with volunteers. And the last thing I would draw your attention to is the fact that we have 3 scouts that will, by the end of the summer, have completed Eagle projects to once again enhance and improve our parks. The rest of my remarks you have in writing. I would be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Linda? Okay, thanks, Linda.
Great report.
And
Thomas?
I will probably sign off and watch the rest of it on YouTube.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good night, thank you. Lee Tucci, are you there?
Yes,
You've made a written report. You have anything you want to add or ask for?
well, I'd like to emphasize a few things. One, despite the virus continue to grow, to die, to fall, they need constant attention. We've had 3 virtual meetings of the Forestation Board, plus many email exchanges since the last official meeting back in March. Key things or priorities for Forestation are the approval of the planting of the 17 trees, which we've been working on really since about January, the details of which are in the council package, and actually pictures of the trees and information on the proposed locations, all on city property. And then in support of that, the approval of the new Treaty C plan, which is also in the council package and signed off by the Forestation Board members.
Lee, it's my understanding that you're asking for the vote of the council accepting your forestation plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any discussion by the council on that plan before I ask for a vote?
This is Greg. I just want to say that I've read through the complete report. It's an awesome report, well done. And I've got one more thing that I'd like to comment on that's not report related before we leave the Forestation Board though. But otherwise, I want to thank the committee for a great report.
Well, Greg, do you want to move the acceptance of that report?
I'd be happy to. So I move that we accept the report as provided by the Forestation Board this evening.
Is there a second?
Which report are we referring to here? The planning proposal?
It's the
No, it's
forestation plan.
The forestation
No,
plan as well. I have one question about the plan. Does anything in the plan
relate to the expenditure of dollars?
Well, it's not required, but in the plan, it, I can read it to you exactly, that one of our key objectives for the plan for the fiscal or calendar year is implement the 17-3 planning plan already developed.
Which is roughly $7,000.
That's right.
6,300.
So there is an economic attachment to us passing it. What if we passed your plan, but then found as we were working on the budget that we didn't have that money? What would that do to your plan?
Well, obviously, we're not going to order any trees or spend any money that isn't approved by council.
Well,
So,
following up on what Sandra just said, maybe you want to wait on approving this plan until you've finished the budget.
we could do that, or we could, doesn't this plan go into your forestation certification?
If we're talking about the Tree City
Yes.
certification, we were certainly certified for last year. The new certification would require that we spend $2 per resident, and that would include allocation of maintenance department time or clerical time, something like that. But that would amount to about $10,000. In order to get a Tree City certification, you have to spend $2 per resident, some of which can be city labor allocated to that.
Lee, what is,
You spend $9,000 on Andrea Hanlon alone.
Yeah, we're proposing for Andrea that $9,240, right? And let me add that probably 90% of the forestation board functions are dependent upon having her guidance and actual work, scouting, et cetera, et cetera. If we didn't have Andrea, we wouldn't really have an effective forestation board.
Lee, this is Frank, are we discussing this thing titled Forestation Board Programs, March through July?
No.
That's not it?
We have two different documents before us, and that's why we're a little
Planning
confused.
proposal and a forestation plan.
Yeah.
Which are we talking about?
It's this one. But this one, it's called Forestation Plan. I don't have one that looks like that.
Nor do I.
Nor do I.
Well, then I guess we have.
like this.
Well,
Well, there's
Okay, I see it now. I see it. Okay, now, the only thing is, this incorporates the dollars that are allocated or requested in this. So they're intertwined, if you will. The other document that you were looking at, Frank, are what they have been doing at their meetings.
Okay, I was just missing this.
Sorry, Lee, but we have a lot of documents here tonight, and you've done a good job in giving us a lot to look at.
Lee, this is Frank again. I have a question on your planting proposal. We have, at least in my mind, a significant problem with trees overhanging our streets. And when we got into the Cali Park, one of the discussions was the breadth of the trees that would be planted, as well as the root systems, whether or not they were deep enough or whether shallow rooted and would kill grass. Has all of that been incorporated into your selection of the trees?
it was.
You say it was?
So these are not the same trees that we had 6 months ago.
They are the same trees.
They are the same trees.
They're the same trees, but consideration was given in their selection to the environment in which they would be placed.
See, I was having trouble back then. I have not looked in 6 months, but back then I was having difficulty in the fact that some of the trees that were near the sidewalk had fully grown canopies that would put them over the road. Have we adjusted any of that planting so that they will not have full canopies that go over Westover Drive?
Not beyond what we originally proposed and had those trees selected. If they would grow up, they could be trimmed a little bit.
Well, looking at your planning proposal in the Chestnut Hill median, the Chinese elm looks like it has a pretty extensive canopy. Is that the proper tree for that particular situation? A median, a wide tree?
well,
a median?
Andrea Herb and I visited that site probably 3 different times and picked out those trees. But if that is a concern, we can certainly review that particular selection.
Actually, what it would make sense is, now that we understand what you're asking for, if we could have some time to take a look and to evaluate these and make sure that we're not asking for something that's unreasonable.
Sure.
Thank you.
Lee, what is the minimum height over a road that a tree can hang? Is it 13 feet?
13.5 feet. It's actually the nuisance ordinance has a higher requirement than the forestation board ordinance, and it's 13.5 feet. Trees have to be cleared for over roads under the nuisance ordinance.
Okay. And our maintenance department is the one who takes care of trimming those up if they're a little bit too low. Is that correct?
Well, the city would be responsible for trimming trees that are on city land. Other trees along the streets in general are the responsibility of the homeowner or property owner.
Okay. If they're median, they're city owned and the city takes care of them. But if they're on a private property, the property owner would have to trim them up. Correct?
The city would have an obligation to tell them that they're in violation of an ordinance.
Okay.
That's correct, and we've done that from time to time, and we have an article proposed for the next electronic newsletter, city newsletter, that talks about that specific requirement for roads and for sidewalks, and also for the constant problem we have of residents cutting down trees along the streets without permission.
Who would be a best contact person to give a list of houses that are where the trees are overhanging the road? If you drove down with a large vehicle, they were hitting. Call City Hall directly or contact somebody from Forestation Board.
Maybe I'm not understanding the question, but
If I drove down any street with a large vehicle in Prospect and I hit trees, who would I contact?
well, you would contact
Give it to me.
City Hall, and then
City Hall directly? Okay.
Give it,
and then
give it to
usually
me.
I get a call from City Hall that says we have a tree problem of some type. We have Andrea go look at that tree, and usually one or more forestation board members looks at that tree, whether it's an overhanging tree or you might say hazardous tree.
Yeah.
If Andrea, who is certified as a hazardous tree determination person, says that tree is hazardous, or in the case of just says that the limbs are overhanging the street, then we fill out a form for Ron Cundiff, who instructs Mike Lash, who's code enforcement, and Mike communicates to the property owner that they need to take remedial action.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Sure.
This is Buick. So let me, if it's okay with everyone, these trees would be planted in the fall, I believe. So we had time. And so let me hold my motion until such time that we've gone through the budget. I see that the numbers are already in there as a plan, so would that be okay with everyone? We'll just revisit this after we approve the budget. I think we have time to plant the trees.
Excellent suggestion, Greg.
So you're-
Just
you're
one more
withdraw-
question.
You're withdrawing your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Lee,
Yes,
on your planning proposal,
yes.
has the arborvitae approved the trees for those locations?
Say that again.
Has your arborvitae approved the tree for the local?
Yes, yes. Our arborist, yes. She visits every site. Actually, Herb and I and Andrea visited every proposed site at least twice.
And so she's deemed them all appropriate.
Yes.
This is Greg. I'd like to change the subject. I'm trying to remember, and I don't think we ever approved someone that you wanted on your committee, Lee, and I think her name was Mrs. Quai.
Yes, Sylvia
Quinn.
Quinn, right. That would be good to get her approved.
And so I don't think we ever did that. So can you bring that back to the council as well?
We talked with the mayor and he said he would do that.
Very good.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that. But she's been coming to all the forestation board meetings. I think it's time that the council vote her up.
We can do that at the next meeting.
Fine. Sandra, do you have any report to give on either the library or the history book tonight?
Actually, not very much. The library is certainly an interactive area with people. And we have now been open for a little more than a week and a half on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for patrons. Tuesday and Thursday, we shelve books and we do sanitation things. The patronage the first week was really disappointing. It's picking up a little bit now. It's not anywhere near normal, but it's coming along. And during that period of time when we were closed, many new books have come in, so there's plenty to read. In regard to the pardon?
I said, that's great.
In regard to the history book, because no one has written a history book of this area before, our primary source of very good information was interviews, and we still cannot get back to the point where we're able to interview people because obviously the typical person that we're interviewing is mature. And right now, they're still a very vulnerable population. But we have done some work on digital research. It's just not as satisfactory. That's all.
All right, any questions? Okay, is Tony Denham there tonight?
Yes, sir. He's on his way up.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tony, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, do you have anything to tell us on the police side?
Yes, I'll be brief. That was a long meeting. I'll take instructions to be brief. House watches are obviously down in the last month. A lot of that has to do with COVID restrictions. People are not traveling out of town. So those actually dropped quite a bit. They started to pick back up just a bit. To be brief on some of the crime statistics. We had a burglar over in the 6,500 block of Saturday. We don't believe that to be anybody from out in the area. There was no forced injury. Happened between 1:30 and 5 in the afternoon. Somebody probably had to go. We think it may be somebody. So it wasn't anything nefarious outside of what you normally do. We did take prints from that location. This is a couple that we thought we might be able to get something back in case someone does not come out. 619, we had over a window of 619, a vehicle was stolen. We had a lot of unlocked vehicles, no matter how many times we had to keep hesitating. The keys were left in the vehicle. I know that sounds crazy, but
That is a huge trend, especially with new vehicles, where it starts without the keys, a little set that has to stay in there to start the ignition. Some folks are leaving those in there. That wasn't the case here. That has happened. Oldham County has had an epidemic of car thieves, so through just rummaging through the car, people, believe it or not, leaving their keys unlocked. That's crazy. We've had very little of it, but it was the case. We have great video for people in a vehicle driving around the area, free get out, go try some cars to see if they're unlocked. They didn't try that car, it was unlocked, rummaging through the vehicle. What they do, they found a set of keys sitting there. Basically, overload. War crime. T-Bucks from vehicles. We got a few last month. Every vehicle we broke into is unlocked. No vehicles are being damaged. I think people have unfortunately decided that I'll leave my car unlocked so nobody breaks out my windows. I've been out here 3 years. One time somebody broke the window out. Those were professionals that did the shopping center. I haven't had it. So definitely we're going to keep educating people out of the car. Nothing big was taken out of that. The only thing that maybe a little bit troubling was magazine. The gun wasn't taken at the time. To be brief, I do want to talk about something that happened a little bit last week. Some of the Southern, John Clark from Southern and Secretary Chief in Maryland. There were quite a few car break-ins out of that area. Store app kind of turned that into something, turned into something else. There weren't near as many vehicles as broken into. Wednesday night and the Thursday last week, we had a few vehicles that were broken into. We started working on some suspect information. Those same guys were pretty sure routing Oldham County with someone called. Our late watch guys went out, assisted. 2 of the 3 got caught. We're working on getting those cases developed. We didn't really have anything major taking out of vehicles. The other case we have is a stolen vehicle. You're at the Circle K, the person went in, left the vehicle running, with the keys in it, came back out, went back in, the keys in it, after the vehicle stayed. We have a good picture of him. He came to the store. We sent that out to everything. Where we're at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony.
I have a question on the code enforcement.
Yes, sir.
This is Mike's.
Oh, okay. I'll try.
It says a citation.
Next order of business is the first.
Hold on, Mayor. Frank's got something.
Yeah,
We're still on the police report.
well, I didn't realize that. I thought he was done.
I have a question regarding the code enforcement. And I had corresponded with Mike this week, who came back to me and said that the governor's executive order prohibited issuance of ordinance citations, ordinance violation citations. I guess this is
Brian, could you get a little closer to the microphone? I'm having trouble hearing.
okay. I'm sorry. Can you hear that now, Chris?
Better, yes.
Okay, I'll go back over it again. The report says it was a citation issue for an ordinance violation. This week I had asked Mike, because we had an earlier conversation, I had asked him what the status of issuing citations for ordinance violations was. He got back to me and said he had talked to Chris Johnson at AOC, and that the governor's executive order placing a moratorium on issuance of citations was still in effect. So I wonder how we're issuing citations. Yes, that's the case, or maybe it's not the case. Do you have any insight on that, Chris?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you. If your question's directed toward me, I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear now?
Yeah, perfect, perfect.
Okay, my mic was off for some reason.
Okay.
All right, I'll go through it again. The report says there was a citation issued for an ordinance violation. And in the conversation with Mike, or actually in correspondence with Mike this week, he said that he had checked with KLC and they told him that the governor's executive order was still in effect. And he said that order prohibited him from issuing citations for ordinance violations. Now, there seems to be an inconsistency here. Can you?
Where's the inconsistency? If the governor's order says he cannot do it, he cannot do it.
Well, the report says that one citation was issued. And if, what John said earlier,
I see.
The police are going down to Sutherland to issue citations, I would assume. If
No. They have not issued any citations. They're just there to make sure that they don't start up too soon.
Well, what if they do?
Well,
What's the recourse if they do?
If the police are there, they don't.
We have to comply with the governor's order.
So the police can't issue a citation for noise, whether it's in Sutherland or Hunting Creek or whatever. That's what Mike says KLC supported, and I just want to make sure what the ground rules are.
Those are the ground rules.
Okay, so that citation was not issued correctly, the one that's cited in the report here.
Well, it says it was in June for a dumpster placed in the street. So I guess my question, elaborating on Frank's, Chris, is when the governor issued his executive order, is it blanket any kind of citation whatsoever? Or is it certain categories? Because if the governor by executive order said we can't issue any citations, can the police not write a speeding ticket or cite somebody for blowing through a stop sign or?
That's not an ordinance. Right. Yeah, that.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about ordinances only. Well,
It is. That's the way KLC.
okay. Get closer in for Chris.
Can't hear you again, Frank.
You just want to make sure we're complying with the governor.
The governor's executive order. And it wouldn't seem to be the case according to this report. So we either issue them or we don't issue them. And we have to enforce that across the board.
Right, as far as the police, we go over there, we'll go over there. And it started.
You guys have both got to get closer to your mics.
As far as the police going over there, we go over there, we're responsible. Between 7 and 8, the trucks are over there knocking there is the heavy equipment.
Whoever's talking needs to talk into the microphone.
And all we do is go over there and get it.
Mike's not on there, Michael.
Is the little green light on now, Tony? Okay.
These are dying out.
Can you hear me now?
I can now.
Yeah, as far as the police are concerned, most of the time we're responding just to calls over there from residents that are complaining about trucks backing up, heavy equipment between usually 7 and 8 in the morning. And anytime we go over there with the gist in mind, we're given a warning, and it works every time. We have a good relationship with the supervisors, the guys that work over there. And yes, there is that ordinance thing that has come up, and it's not really clear.
Okay, but you're just using a common sense approach, and that's a
Yes.
good approach. Yeah, I got it.
Well, my concern is we're enforcing or non-enforcing across the board. We can't pick and choose. My question isn't directed at Sutherland.
Right. Other issues, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you ready to move on?
Could I just ask a question, Mayor? I'm no attorney. I do remember reading that when it came out. I took it to mean that it wasn't 100% of the time. I think the intent of that directive from the governor was to circumvent close contact. So, and I think there are circumstances whereby they would be called for. So could I just ask our city attorney to look into that further and report back at the next meeting?
Be glad to. Be glad to.
Thank you.
And in the meantime, Chris will talk to me and I'll know what I'm doing. Let's move into the various ordinances that are up for a first reading, shall we? Now, the first one on this list deals with fences, and we don't have that ordinance to put before you. So it doesn't seem that that one is ready for a first reading because we don't have it to look at.
Well, it's ready, but it's not here, so we can't.
You say it's ready, but it's not here.
It's not part of the package.
Well, we didn't get it.
John, we got it. We got it. But it doesn't make any difference. It's not in the packet. So we can't do it.
Well, it couldn't be in the packet, Frank, because we never got it.
Frank, no one ever sent me a copy of that ordinance. There was no way I could share it with council.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
No one ever sent me a copy of that ordinance.
So we can't have a first reading of something that nobody's got. So I would say,
John, this was brought up, that ordinance was brought up at the last regular meeting. So it was there and it's in here in this set, but we can't deal with it anyway. So it's a moot point. But it's in this building because we brought it up the last meeting, not the last special meeting.
Laura, have you ever seen it?
I was under the impression that it was being revised. I never saw a copy of the revised fence ordinance.
There is not one.
All right, well, that was not made clear to me.
Okay.
But Frank, my recollection is just that there were some suggested edits to that made at the last meeting.
The program is the first reading. Then we get your first and second reading. The changes are introduced, some significant, some not. If they're insignificant, it's changed at the point of the second reading, not at the first reading. We don't change it. It doesn't give the public an opportunity to review this. We're sitting on it trying to make the changes. You got to get something on the table.
Right.
For everybody to read exactly the word. And what we have right now is rumors floating around of what's in this, what's in that, and why it's good, what's bad.
Okay,
We have to get it in front of the public.
well, I'm a little confused by what you're saying for this reason. My recollection is, and I think Sandra, I've run this by you before, your recollection is when this sitting of the council first formed about 1.5 years ago, we were looking for a mechanism to make sure that we could have a full discussion in public without having to bring something forward for a first reading, so we could then incorporate that input and do a first reading that had a good chance of going on without amendments to a second reading and passing easily. So when a ordinance comes forward, we move to just have a discussion of the topic, not a reading of the first ordinance. Then we have our debate. We've been doing that for several months now. When we think we have some consensus here, we draft those changes in, have a first reading next month, unless something else pops up or we didn't capture something properly, then we go to the second reading and it's adopted. So are you suggesting that we change that approach?
No, I think the procedure is sound. Bring it to the table for a first reading. Second, that there's discussion on whether or not it have sufficient support to have a first reading.
Right.
Okay, suggestions or whatever. But you still have the first reading. You still have the proposed ordinance.
Well,
Except why would you do,
Thank you, Ron.
why would you do a first reading if the document needs to be changed significantly to have a second reading? Then the first reading is a moot point. Why not? I thought we were having our discussion, like Randy said, so that we could deliver a document with a reasonable expectation of a second reading. Otherwise, a first reading doesn't really accomplish anything.
Well, it accomplishes getting it in front of the council in its finished form.
But you can put it in front of the council for discussion purposes.
Well, of course.
And it's not in finished form if it's going to have substantive changes.
Well, but if it has
Well,
minor
yeah, but-
changes,
but
the next meeting it can
that's
be
a
approved and be
Let's see
done.
if it has minor changes after the discussion, you
But
could
that's,
go to a
that's
first reading.
presumptive that you're going to have significant changes. I mean, you've got to
Some
get.
of the ones we've had over the last 6 months, in fact, almost all of them have had significant changes.
The fence ordinance, is there any significant changes? Because we've all read through it.
Yeah, there are very many significant changes. I've gotten emails and phone calls from people this week who are very concerned about the fence
Well,
ordinance.
that's my point, Sandra. If they haven't seen it.
Well,
how
they
can-
saw it when it came through last time, and then everybody, I think Laura's correct, we had an expectation that there were going to be some substantive changes.
I still stand by it. We've got to get these as a first reading and get them in front of everybody, including ourselves and the mayor.
They
and the
don't
mayor.
have to have a first reading to get in front of people. They don't. We can have discussion without, a first reading is a technicality, and it's an important one. And that technicality doesn't preclude us from early discussion to create something at a first reading that has a reasonable expectation of passing.
Well, then where are we at on this? Because we've been dealing with this for a couple months now and we haven't gotten
Well, we're kicking
anywhere.
it down the road again.
Yeah.
That's really what we're doing.
So
Well, but
what
the
can
other
we do to
thing
get
is,
this done?
as of right now, there are people who are very concerned about some of what's in there. And they'll be here at the next meeting if that's what's on the agenda, the
Well,
way
that's-
it is without
But
changes.
that's the way the system works. They're supposed to be
But we
here.
could change it and make it more effective and have a real first
What
reading.
changes do we need to make it more
We need to
effective?
take a very healthy look at what was removed. We removed things like corner lots. In all of the new subdivisions, recent subdivisions, I shouldn't say new because they're not, there are corner lots, and those clauses were in there for a reason. All of the newer subdivisions, including the breakers, when it's finished, will have boundary fences. And if we deal with boundary fences in the same fashion that we deal with fences that are around our own personal property, we've created a monster, and we need to think that through.
How
We
do need
also,
to
in
deal
terms-
differently?
Starting with the citations and everything else, the way if you're gonna take and go in and issue huge citations, you bankrupted the HOAs within a week.
Why would you think that that would be part of what is in that ordinance?
Because it is. It ultimately, if the fence is a nuisance, it goes and it ends up having
But
a
that
financial
argument
penalty.
follows every ordinance we have, which says you can be fined And every day you can be fined more, and every instance you can be fined more. So
That's right.
that's throughout our ordinances.
That means
That's
that
not,
we need to
that's
think
not
about what we're trying to
specific
do.
offenses.
I know, that's why we need to think about what we're saying in regard to those. The other thing that we've got is we have colors and whatnot in there. The most common color is black, and it's probably followed by brown, and brown was not in that
Well, we
initial
said
ordinance.
that's easily changed.
I know, but then it does, see, there we are talking about
But right
changes.
now, that's not a significant change because we say natural wood, which is brown.
But it
So if
doesn't
you
have
want
to
to
be.
expand it, brown's okay, and that is not a substantive change.
That's fine, but that's the kind of discussion we were having.
Well, we did.
But that's why we thought there were going to be changes.
Well, we also have had a number of questions again about the boundary fences. And
But there's been, I understand that, but there's been no positive input. Say, okay, you don't like the words that are in there. Unless you see the words and come up with an alternative, then we're, again, just, you know.
I understand your frustration, and I suggested, which I know won't be very popular, the boundary fences right now, at least, there are others, but the ones that have had the most input are Innisbrook, Sutherland, and Smithfield Green. I would sit down with representatives of each of those subdivisions and say, okay, we know this presents problems for you. What are potential solutions?
We can do that after a first reading.
But why? There's no, then you've got to do another first reading.
It
This
may
is
be,
not
but you
making sense.
get it all out in front, which is the way the system's supposed to work. Among ourselves.
Are you saying that we aren't going to vote on a first reading? Is that what you're saying? We're just going to first read? We're not going to vote?
We have to vote to bring it to the floor. I mean, that's just the way the process works, isn't it?
But then we have been taking votes on first readings, which is what Randy said.
Yes.
We've had two votes.
To bring it to the
For
floor.
discussion.
Any action
Correct.
we do, you have
And
to
then
bring
we
it
have
to
taken another vote to go to a first reading.
No.
Yes.
The
that's what
vote
we-
is to bring it to the floor for a first reading. You either do or don't.
Okay, well, we haven't been doing it that way
That's correct.
most recently. We have been bringing it to the floor for a motion to bring it to the floor for discussion, and after the discussion, then we have a motion for a first reading.
Right.
And then we do the first reading. So we have been doing two motions, the discussion and then the first reading. Sometimes we've been able at that same time to incorporate those changes into the first reading. So where it's been corrected at that point, and that gives it a much better chance of flowing through quickly and efficiently to a second reading. Sometimes we have done the first motion and there's been so much discussion or question or lack of clarification on the part of some folks that we then don't go ahead and do the motion that night for the first reading. We go back and rework the ordinance to try to address those issues and then bring it back at the next meeting for a first reading. So that's the process we have been following for about the last 18, 19 months. So I'm a little confused that for some reason tonight, this is different.
I'm sorry, Frank.
Well, I just
This
don't
is
know.
Greg.
Yeah.
I'd just like to weigh in on this. There's no urgency on this fence ordinance. And yet there are some major changes to it that has already been brought up tonight, namely the boundary fences. Those are huge differences than what we have in our current ordinance. And the penalties associated with those are tremendous if allowed to accumulate over time, which they could. We heard one of the representatives from Innisbrook speak at one of our meetings, I think it was the June meeting, about the difficulty in getting suppliers contractors rather, to do that work. And then there's concerns over who owns the fences. There are a lot of issues. So for me, I'd rather take the time and do it right. There's no urgency to get this done tonight or even the next meeting, so I'd rather just take our time and do it right. I like Sandra's idea of asking the HOA leaderships, Smithfield Green and Sutherland and Innisbrook, getting their input on it. And then I like the idea when I like the idea of representing the people. And that's my way of doing that is let's ask their opinions. Let's get their opinion on it because it's a big change. And the penalties on this could be if it's the way it is right now, it could be $100,000. It could be a heck of a lot of money. So anyway, it's nothing to sneeze at.
You're concerned about the financial impact to Sutherland's HOA?
Well, sure, not just Sutherland, but anyone who has a boundary fence like that, if they couldn't get it fixed in the appropriate time, that could add up. What was it, $50 a day or something?
Well, that, as I said before, that's part and parcel of just about every nuisance ordinance we have. So that argument that
That's new. We don't have a nuisance in the fence right now, so that's a big deal. It's a big change, is what I'm saying.
well, anyway,
I think we ought to ask the people.
I don't have a problem with that. I say, but the time to do that is between the first and second readings. And if there's some substantive changes, then you make the changes, you have another first reading, but you have the input you're looking for, and the forum is the council meeting. So I think
I know there's been a change to it because one of the council members mentioned to me that he was looking at it. I've not seen it, so I don't have anything really to look at tonight to even tell you if I like it or don't like it. So.
Well, it's a moot point because it's not included and we spent a lot of time on it.
So what can we do to get it included for first reading for next meeting?
I would start by talking to the people that have already expressed their opinions and find out what their concerns are.
Well, who are they?
Who are those people?
Who are those people? I mean, that's the point.
We had 2 people from Sutherland at the last meeting.
But they didn't comment on that.
They were very concerned about the fence ordinance.
No.
And actually, who are they? I would pick the heads of the HOAs of those 3 locations, although I realize that gives us conflict of interest.
Well, I know that Don Grader spoke to it specifically, and I know that Steve Stowers and John Clark came to the meeting, but wanted to concentrate on what they thought might have been a variance that would have been proposed by the Breakers developer. So they concentrated their time on that, tried to save the time for the council since Don had already made his point about the fencing. But I do know that it's a concern of the Sutherland HOA. I didn't know that for a fact.
Well, let me just ask a general question. I mean, if we're writing ordinances because of a real or imagined financial impact on people, why are we writing ordinances at all?
That's correct. We have a lot of dilapidated fences on private property right now that nothing's getting done.
There's a lot more to that ordinance than just boundary fences. And if you recall why we took the initiative to rewrite that ordinance, we've corrected a lot of, updated a lot of things that we felt were necessary. So, but again, it's a moot point now because we don't have it. We haven't met the criteria for it. So we should move on.
I agree. The next ordinance that's up for a first reading is 597, and that is the code enforcement, giving the code enforcement officer authority to grant a period of time in which to remedy a violation instead of immediately issuing a citation. So somebody want to move it up for discussion?
I move it to the floor for a first reading.
I second that.
I'd like to discuss it before we do a first reading.
I would too.
I would too.
One of my questions is, if we have an executive order right now from the governor that prohibits us from issuing any citations for any of our ordinances, why make this amendment now instead of waiting? Because Sandra and I are pretty close on bringing the entire overhaul of the code enforcement section forward for council's consideration.
Just to get it done, if there's any delay in yours, any discussion months down the line, as soon as that executive order from the governor is lifted, this
Okay.
can be in place. It'll be included in yours, obviously, at that point. It does no harm. It gives Mike the leeway afterwards to do what he's already doing, which is common sense and really helping the community out, in my opinion.
Okay, and that's sort of my second question is, and maybe I just haven't understood this properly, but I kind of thought he was already doing things.
He is
that
doing
way.
that, but if he
It is,
goes,
Not legally.
yeah, if he goes by the code
He's not doing
enforcement,
it
he's
legally.
supposed to see something, cite something. And-
Actually, it isn't quite like that, but I agree with Harold. This should have been in our ordinance decades ago. It wasn't. But even we've been doing it all of this time, the only concern, because I do think this has to be included in the
Yes.
ordinance going forward. My only concern is to put this whole thought process in the mind of a single person. I think that the person who is in charge of the city for these kinds of things initially is the mayor. And I think that in addition to a code enforcement officer, it needs to include the mayor or the mayor's designee in the decision-making process. Other than that, I 100% support it. And again, we've been violating the law for decades.
I could go with that. This is exactly word for word from the KRS.
Yeah, I know.
So it's kind of hard to argue with that, but I see what Sandra's saying, instead of just leaving it up to one person.
And that was gonna be my comment
Yep.
also. That was gonna be my number two, is that I think
So-
we should never have a situation where there's only one person on the staff.
Does anybody have a
They
suggestion
can-
then? For,
I think it should be if Mike's not available, the mayor or his designee.
so
Well,
add
it
it,
doesn't have to have them just not be available. You never want to set up a
Yeah.
situation where you create potential for public employee bribery.
Mhm.
And when you end up putting all of the decision-making process in a single person, we have great employees, that isn't my point. But that's why I'd like it to be the mayor or the mayor's designee,
so it could be code enforcement officer and the mayor, so they both have to agree on it?
or the mayor's designee.
I see.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Would that be a significant change, or can we continue with the first reading?
I think first reading, I mean, that, to me,
That's
that's
up to Chris.
I don't think it's a significant change.
a
We do it-
difference without a distinction. I mean,
Oh,
Correct.
no, I think it's
He has
very
a boss, he
important.
has a boss now. Mike has a boss, and the mayor,
But if Mike doesn't come back and talk to the boss is not part of the decision-making process. And I think that you never want to put that kind of onus on a single employee. It creates too many potential problems.
And Mike's immediate supervisor, so his boss is actually Ron.
Right.
And
So
with all
that could
the,
be the mayor's designee.
yeah, and so he could be the mayor's designee, but my preference is that we would say Mike or the mayor or the mayor's designee.
Why don't you just amend it right now to state the sense of the council, the mayor and or his designee? Just include that and then give it the first reading.
Right after code enforcement officer?
Yes,
As
yes.
that line starts? Perfect. We'll add that in, do a first reading, and move
Right,
on.
do a motion on that and have it approved and then have the first reading. Have a motion to amend.
So
I
moved.
move that we amend
Okay.
the document to say the code enforcement officer and the mayor or the mayor's designee.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So be it. All right, somebody ready to give it a first reading as written?
I'm ready to give a first reading. City of Prospect, Kentucky, ordinance 597, series 2020. An ordinance amending 39.09, the City of Prospect Code Code of Ordinances regarding code enforcement proceedings by granting the code enforcement officer the authority to grant a period of time to which a remedy of violation in lieu of immediately issued a citation.
All right. We'll move on to ordinance 598.
Can we do 600 next, just in case someone's in the audience here that wants to comment? Would that be possible?
What do you want to do, Greg?
Could we do the reading on the ordinance 600, 2020 next?
Unfortunately, we don't have that ordinance to share with anybody either.
I beg your pardon.
But if we had somebody who wants to speak to it, we could certainly allow them to do that, Greg.
Okay.
Y'all want to talk? That's fine.
Is anyone there that wants to speak on it? I just didn't know.
I don't think we're aware of anyone, Greg.
Okay. I beg your pardon. Thank you.
So we're back to ordinance 598. That's the amendment of the and modification of the budget of the general fund of the city for last year.
Actually, a general statement before we do that. I had problems with taking the layout of this document and relating it to the layout of our working papers and the layout of the papers that we're getting showing the expenditures and by line item. I would hope in the future we can parallel those documents.
Does anyone want to move this on the floor for discussion?
I'll move it on the floor for discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's on the floor for discussion. Hearing none, does anybody want to give it a first reading?
I had some questions before we do that, and they tend to relate to if I try to correlate the ordinance with the budget versus actuals, I have trouble when I get over to street maintenance and landscape maintenance, non-contractual. I can't totally, but just starting with the street maintenance, I don't understand the lines under that.
$18.50. Yes.
Because if you take it and look at this,
Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, street maintenance paving, is that the line?
yeah, what's the difference and what's the difference between street maintenance and paving? Why are there two different numbers? What's the difference between those two?
Paving is a component of street maintenance. This
Okay.
amendment is modeled on the budget ordinance that was passed last year. So I took that format and duplicated it for this amendment. And this is exactly how y'all asked to have street maintenance and paving indicated in the original ordinance. So paving is part of street maintenance.
And is none of this money road aid money?
No, this is all operating funds.
Okay. Then if I come over and I look at 741 in the budget versus actual.
$751.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you're right. Again, I thought that some of this money was road aid money. I thought, for example, the snow removal came from road aid.
No, these are all operating funds that we decide to pay for snow removal and salt. None of this is road aid money.
Does it qualify for road aid?
Well, let me ask you this. The next first reading on here is ordinance 599, which has to do with the municipal road aid fund. So I think this is one component of it, and then the road aid fund, I think, Sandra, that you're asking about, is dealt with separately in the next ordinance that's up.
It is, but I can't figure out why we would not have taken snow removal, for example, out of road aid money. Why would we take that out of general fund money when it clearly can come out of road aid?
Well, do all of these 751 category qualify for road aid under the statutes that govern it?
I'm not positive about 7515, but the others do, yes. As to why we didn't take this out of road aid, it's because we were trying to give it the opportunity to build up so that we could do a big paving project. So when the opportunity came up, and this is only something we've been doing the past couple of years, we've budgeted operating funds to pay for some of these things to reduce the load on the road aid fund.
So are we saying that last year, when road aid was 226,000, that we had an additional 245,000 or 200? I can't make the numbers work.
Yes, what you say is that last year in the operating fund, we budgeted 226,000. And in the road aid fund, we had an additional 245,000 because we were hoping to do a really big paving project.
But in the course of all my paving discussions, I never came up with a $500,000. It just never was a part of a dialogue all year long. And now when I look at these, I'm getting concerned about what are we taking into next year. I'm just afraid that some of what we're calling general fund money is road aid money. Because let's say, for the sake of argument, that we have $50,000 in road aid, we don't spend it, and we pull it forward to the following year. Fine. It's still road aid money. It's not general fund money when it gets rolled over. And I'm afraid a little bit of what I'm looking at here is a possibility of things not being segregated in a way that we may want to segregate them.
They are segregated as is required. The point is, by setting aside operating money in addition to road aid money, we can do more paving.
No, I understand that, but what we never, at least I never thought we had $500,000.
I know I have mentioned it many, many times, and it was something that was discussed when we were working on this budget a year and a half ago.
Okay, so your impression is that the road aid money going forward for this fiscal year that we're currently in is $258,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we didn't spend the bulk of our money for last year. So the two of them together are roughly $500,000. Is that correct?
Very close to that.
Can we have somebody look at it for confirmation?
Sure, I'll talk to the bookkeeper.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that, really. Now, I had a similar, but not in terms of restricted funds. I had a similar problem when I was trying to pull over to the budget ordinance, the landscape maintenance non-contractual.
That is entrance and common area maintenance, irrigation, electrical, and the insecticide treatment combined.
Okay. But it doesn't include the contractual money. It just includes, things like irrigation systems,
Yes.
right?
Yes, the Greenscapes contract is a separate line.
Okay.
Laura, does Greenscapes handle our irrigation systems, turning them on and off each year?
I do.
Covered under their contract, or Ron?
We do not have a contract for irrigation.
Okay, so do the staff turn the systems on and off each year, or?
Well, actually, I usually go through and turn them on and call them for repairs, because when there's always something wrong with all of them. Shut down they do, because they have to blow the systems out.
So that is not part of the Greenscapes contract?
Contract, no.
Okay.
There is no irrigation contract.
Okay.
So I have a question. On the second page, you have total spending, $2,945,76. Then you have the paving, 173, and transfer to reserves for capital projects, 274,642. I see how you got that. I think you took the original budget, less the total spending, less the 173, and that came to the 274. What does that mean, transfer to reserves for future capital projects?
It really just means this is, once we take out the amount that's committed to paving, this is what we put in our piggy bank, and just a suggestion for how it to be spent in the future.
Okay,
Okay.
can it be used for the general account for general spending?
Absolutely. This is y'all's ordinance. Decide if that's what you want to do with the surplus.
Yeah, I think because in 2020, or after June 30th, our 10th party Tax Republic Bank had 1.708462 million in it. 2019, June 30th is 1.358074. So there's 350,000 more in cash this year in the 10th party than there was in last year. And so that got there as a result of running under budget. Is that correct?
I'll have to take your word for it.
It's the only
Well,
place it could come
appreciate that.
from, Don.
I have another question. We're doing an amendment to the budget. And it says in the columns, original budget, amended budget. The amended budget, though, is, I'm hearing you say, are actual expenditures. They're not really, they're only an amended budget because that's what our actual expenditures came to. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's after certain things like tree removals and irrigation repairs that had to be paid for out of the mayor's discretionary fund because we had already met the budget limits for non-contractual landscaping. So once we recoded everything to where it should be. So for example, if you look at non-contractual landscaping, we truly spent $19,783 on that this year.
Okay, so did you lower the account where the mayor's got a?
Yes, yes, his ended up being 900 and some in the end.
Gotcha, okay. That's actually very helpful, thank you. Actually, I would like to amend the transfer to reserves for future capital projects to something broader, but if we do that, I'd move this to a first reading.
What is it you'd like to do?
I'd like to change the words, transfer to reserves for future capital projects, because it creates an impression different from what's in my mind. I'd like those reserves to exist, but I'd like them to be applied where we need to apply them, which may just include boring maintenance activities.
Exactly. Expense.
How would you like
So you're saying we just delete four words?
Sandra?
Yeah, just have it transferred to reserves and take it out for future capital projects.
Transfer to reserves.
Words for future capital projects?
Yes.
Yes.
Strike those 4 words.
All right, they're stricken.
Should
Yeah.
we have a specific motion to make that change?
Yes, we should, thank you.
So
I move
moved.
that we amend that line to delete the 4 words in question.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So now it just says transfer to reserves.
So you ready for first reading?
Now we need a first reading on this.
Who will do it?
So do we need a motion for a first reading? Okay.
No, you just-
So moved.
No, actually, no, you just need to
No,
read
you
it.
just go ahead.
I just need to
Somebody
read it. Okay. First reading of ordinance 598, 2020, an ordinance relating to the amendment and modification of the budget for the general fund of the city of Prospect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2019 and ending June 30, 2020.
Done. And that moves us to
599.
599. And that's the municipal road aid fund ordinance. Somebody want to move that?
Move it to the floor
for
for
discussion? Yeah,
a first reading.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, it's on the floor.
Page. 99.
Oh, okay, now we're at 589, 2020.
We need to do first reading, 599.
Yeah, this is 599.
Road aid fund.
No, we
No, we
did
did
598.
Somebody want to do the first reading for 599 or?
Correct.
Got it?
599.
First reading for ordinance 599, 2020. An ordinance relating to the amendment and modification of the budget for the Municipal Road Aid Fund of the City of Prospect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2019 and ending June 30, 2020.
All right.
Question?
And that brings us to, no, they just gave it a first reading.
Yeah. So we're now at second reading of 589.
Oh, you have to wait a meeting to do it. You can't do it tonight.
No, the second reading of 589.
589, yeah,
Next page.
Okay, flipped over. That is the annual calendar for meetings ordinance. Somebody want to move it on the floor for discussion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's on the floor for discussion.
We've talked about this fairly extensively. It's moderately not controversial. It gets us out of the problem that we had in January, I think it was. And other than that, it just tidies up some language that we've got.
Move to approve second reading.
Second.
Frank, has motion to adopt this ordinance?
Yes.
Yes.
I just move to adopt. Move to adopt.
Second.
Second? Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? Not, we'll come to a vote.
I'm just checking, John, to make sure. We had asked for a slight change as regarded the calendar. And I just want to make sure that that got in here from last time.
I meant it certainly is something I spent time on. I hope it came out all right. You added 2 words, I think, didn't you? Yes, they're in there.
Where is it?
I don't have it in front of me, but it's in.
Okay, it's up here in 3221.
Hey,
Yes, it's in there. We're good.
Okay.
Okay, you ready to vote?
Yes.
Sandra, does this need a roll call?
May as well.
Actually, all ordinances require roll call vote.
Thank you.
I asked the wrong person.
Yes, you did.
yeah,
Mr. Fulcher,
Aye.
who's that?
Randy.
Ron
Yes.
Gibson.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chu, yeah, Mrs. Leonard,
Yes.
and Mr. Hilsman.
Yes.
Unanimous. So that has been passed. Okay, the next is the mayor's ordinance, 590-2020. Anybody want to move that to the floor?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any discussion? Not, I'll ask if there's a motion to adopt this ordinance.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All right, same thing. Mr. Fulcher,
Yes.
Mrs. Swan,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Shu,
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard,
Yes.
and Mr. Hilsman.
And yes.
Unanimous. So that's passed. And last but not least, the ordinance adopting the supplement to the Code of Ordinances of the City of Prospect. Want to move that to the floor for discussion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's on the floor. Any discussion?
Move to
Hearing
adopt.
none, hearing none, you have a motion to adopt this ordinance.
Move to adopt.
Second.
All right, Mr. Fulcher,
Yes.
how do you vote? Mr. Swan,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Shu,
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard,
Yes.
Mr. Hulsman,
Yes.
and that's adopted. All right. Now we're down to the budget work session.
If you all will excuse me, I have a family matter to deal with, so I've got to exit at this time. But I do want to reiterate for everyone here, we've been through a number of budget sessions now. We've asked a lot of excellent questions. I think the council has a much better handle on the budget, what comprises it. I do not want anyone to assume, though, that just by virtue of the questions or lack of questions on my part, others can speak for themselves, that means that I am satisfied with those sections of the budget as is. I think when we get to the end of this very shortly, there will need to be some changes. Money is going to have to come out of some places to go to others. For example, Ron said at the last meeting, there were 3 significant maintenance issues that came up after the preliminary budget was presented to us. And they're going to very much have to be dealt with in the coming year, but that money is not necessarily in that budget. So we're going to have to find the money somewhere in there to take care of those kinds of things. So I've heard the comment occasionally, well, why don't we just vote now? I'm fine with it. Well, others of you might be fine with it at this point, and I respect that. I'm not yet, and since that is the largest responsibility that any council member has, I think we need to finish having our questions answered and then going back through, and perhaps a committee of 3 of us can take the input from everyone else and your priorities and concerns and try to work those into the budget and come back then with something else that's more updated for everyone's final discussion and review. Those are just my thoughts for the evening. Thank you.
Okay.
It was my understanding that we were going to get a list of outstanding maintenance projects and roughly what they would cost. And if we've been given that, I'm not looking at it and seeing it.
They are there. Hold on just a second.
What do they look like?
Actually, they're not in the packets that were sent to you. Ron just emailed it out this afternoon. Wasn't that it?
Are you talking about the maintenance duties?
No,
List.
no, these were projects.
I know.
Actually, one of them is on 8611. 2 of them are actually the repair to the Bolt Mountain Dam.
You're
7,500.
not clear.
You're not, yeah, you're not.
We're not
coming.
understanding you.
Where are they, Ron?
Hold on a second. Can you hear me now?
I can.
8611.
8611.
Repairs to Auction Dam, 7,500.
Is the boat launch fully repaired now?
It is underway. He has ripping it down and it should be done by the end of the week, weather permitting.
Where is that money coming from? You're operating on last year's budget. What line item would we expect that to come from?
Parks maintenance. And actually you have to remember that's completely unplanned for, so.
So the proposed budget is 2,000 and it's going to cost, just it alone is cost 7,500.
Ron, can I jump in here? And if I don't have this right, you correct me, but was it Putney Pond Dam repair, was it that 4K? And then we had the canoe launch, that was another 4K. And then we had the Fox Harbor entrance.
3,500.
3,500. And then we've had the Fox Harbor entrance, that was 3 different prices depending upon which route we chose. And then we had the door that I think Sandra.
No, the landings entrance, that's on a different line.
Is it okay, landings, okay.
I don't know what you're looking at, but I don't seem to have it in front of me.
I don't have it either. It's just information that I picked up somewhere along the line. But I think some of what Ron mentioned at the last meeting, I know we had 3 different prices on the landings. Apparently that entrance is in bad shape. So we could piecemeal it for a little bit of money, and then we could make it last for maybe 5 to 10 years for, I think it was 15,000. And then to really fix the whole thing was 100,000, if I remember correctly.
Okay, but those are the things we've got to look at so we can come up with a number. I mean, right now, there's a floating number of 14,000. I have no clue what that would do, whether it's adequate or inadequate. And so we have to look at all of those numbers and all of the outstanding projects that need to take place.
Ron, you're on.
I have them on my sheet. I don't know why you all don't.
No, see, things that I'm looking at don't begin to approach letting us know what the problems are and how much it's going to cost to solve them and what priority order they should be put in.
Like I said, I don't know why you don't have it. I have all that. Actually, when I reworked the budget, we added 3 lines. For Frank's request, we're trying to get it to where we can track our supplies better. What we spend at the hardware store, what we spend for small equipment, and city hall projects. Do you all have 7313 A, B, and C on your new sheet?
You know what? No, we don't, but I know I got that in my email. So I'm pulling up right now.
It should be at your seat, Harold, because I printed copies for everybody.
Yes, you make copies. Yeah. We've got answer the questions. Yes,
I've got it.
Am I sitting in my seat? Yeah. No, it's okay. I can pull it up. That's cool. I know I saw it. Yep. Thank you.
If I could weigh in on the 8611, that was initially requested 6,500, which is what the Parks Committee requested for their budget for parks maintenance for this year. And then Ron took the cost of the repairs for the boat launch of the dam, which came to 7,500, and added that to the initial 6,500 request.
Well, what does that 6,500 include?
Well, that's the Parks Committee's number. That's what they've asked for.
But we don't know what they're going to do with it?
I'm going to go on and say this for general maintenance projects.
Okay, I guess since we just got this when we sat down here tonight, I need more time to look at it and to ask questions. Right now, I'm glad you put these numbers in here, But unless I know what they do, I don't know how they affect other numbers.
This is Greg. I agree with Sandra. I just now realized that on the second page of Linda's report, she has built into it the canoe launch and Putney Pond Dam repairs. So I'm confused now because I know that's $7,500, but that's not in the 6,500. It doesn't appear. So I'm like Sandra. I'd just like to go back and review all of that before we know for sure.
You know, Ron, I think it would be helpful if you could give us a list of projects that's in the, for instance, the facilities and equipment maintenance for City Hall, the 63. List the project, the amount, kind of priority, and any comment on it, so we can on one page.
Well-
70, well, y'all don't have it, but it's in 7313. There is a list.
But there's no money in there.
Yeah, there is 8,500 for the HVAC for the police department, which we are, Sandra, rerouting the vents for you.
In 7313,
7313C.
okay, the 23,000.
23, HVAC, council door, okay.
There you are.
Okay, and why are we taking the ceiling parking lot out of there and out instead of out of?
That is why there's a question mark after that. I didn't know if you were going to take that out of row 8 or not. So I put it there.
Okay.
It can actually be moved, no problem.
Okay, I would be happy if we would consider another session so that we've got time to take a look at some of these. I'm understanding that there's a lot in here.
In the interest of saving time so we can get a budget passed, if you guys have questions, please answer my emails. I could have this stuff ready for you instead of having surprises, so.
I agree with you.
So Ron, what's in the red is the projects that's justifying these funds.
Actually, okay, and one of the things that would help is, for example, on the landings entrance, it would help us to know that you've had 3 bids and what they include. I mean,
we do not have 3 bids on this. If we go with the 2 options, we don't need to rebid it.
but we don't even know what those options included.
Yeah, I think you did have that. It was explained in the last one, 3 different options and 3 different prices.
And where are they?
Which the third one is completely out of the question. I think $100,000 is too much. We'd have to massively bid that one out anyway.
Ron, real quick, sealing the parking lot here at City Hall for $10,000. What does that include?
That would be sealing the parking lot and restriping it.
That's it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And $10,000 is a placeholder on that. I was hoping to talk to Sandra because she's been doing most of the paving stuff. And I don't know if they've discussed a price on the parking lot or not. So that's actually just a placeholder.
Actually, it would help if Harold and Don have been working with me now for months on paving. Maybe if the 3 of us could get together with you so that we can come up with a plan, that would help a lot.
$10,000 to me seems like a lot just to seal it, but
I think it is. I was being safe when I put the 10,000 out there. So
that's fine.
Yeah,
that's absolutely fine.
okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I would still like to consider picking a date for another meeting.
Before, one more question for Ron, please. The 7412, 25,000 includes 15K. What other infrastructure or capital infrastructure items would constitute the 10 grant?
I'm sorry, what number are you on again?
7412.
Interest, 20,000.
That was left there for a contingency fund in case something, well, like a tree falls, it hits a wall and
So it's $10,000 of contingency and the rest is the landings?
yes.
Okay, and where would you take? Well, I guess that's why I have to look at it, because I still need to know what outstanding maintenance projects you've got that you think are important and roughly how much money you need for each one of them.
We pretty much, what I gave you is pretty much what we need.
Okay, where's Putney Pond?
You can't, Putney Pond is in, we've already talked about it. 8611 Parks Maintenance.
Hey, Ron, this is Greg. I want to go back to Frank's question on 7412. You said that's for nothing specific, that's a placeholder?
The extra 10 is, because we have to have something in there in case something happens. If
Okay, and then,
we budgeted for 15 and we spend the 15, then we're up the creek the rest of the year.
okay, so the boat launch and the landings repair, that's not in there? Or
That's it. That's in parks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and so you're anticipating that Putney Pond would be roughly $6,500?
7,500.
Okay, but then already the amount of money's up.
Actually, I think Putney Pond is 4,500. Wasn't it 3,000 for the boat
Oh,
launch?
I'm sorry, I was combining them together. It was, the boat launches was 3,500, the dam was 4,500.
Okay.
And those commitments have already been made, right?
Yes. Both safety issues, so we had to go on and take care of them.
Okay, when would you like to meet again?
About next June.
No.
Works for me.
No, both of you, no.
I like the way Frank thinks.
How about next Tuesday?
Sure.
We've been doing well on Tuesdays. Can you do it?
Sure.
At 3?
I'm good, Tuesday.
Tuesday at 3?
Works for me.
I'm good.
You're not talking about tomorrow. You're talking
So that would be the 28th at 3.
28th. Okay.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
And I thoroughly invite you all to get hold of me during the week so we can work this out. That way we can go on and get a budget done.
We certainly will. We'll talk to you about getting a date for a paving meeting before we leave
Definitely.
tonight, okay? Thanks.
Definitely.
And also, Ron, I'd like a little more information on salt. You explained it in the past, but felt that buying in volume is something that we really couldn't do very well.
Right.
And where the salt numbers come from and how we're going to deal with that. Okay, and just generally.
As a general rule, the way salt works is basically the more you buy, the cheaper it is per ton. We actually tried two years ago, bought 50,000 tons. Unfortunately, we had no snow that winter, so it sat outside at the port of Louisville, and we lost a good portion of it to the weather. Our salt shed is fairly adequate. So I think it's 250 ton is about all we can get in there. Don't quote me on that, but it's not much.
Anchorage's salt shed is full to the ceiling right now with salt.
Mm-hmm.
So you got a huge shed with nothing but storing salt right now in the middle of summer. So it's good and bad, good and bad.
But my question, deals with the numbers. How do we arrive at 15,000? That, you don't have to answer that right now, but it's a question that's open, okay?
Okay, yeah, but basically salt pricing salt is actually like a commodity. It goes up and down, with supply and demand, but, 15,000, I think is the average of what we've been spending. I caution about going any less than that, because if we have one bad winter, then we're scrambling.
Oh, absolutely. I remember we had one of those. We had one where plowing was amazing too.
Uh-huh. I'm hoping to keep going the current pattern, because I'm a fan of global warming.
I knew you were gonna say that. Okay, are we ready to adjourn?
Ron, I'd like to see, when we get together, I'd still like to see a list of your projects. That by description, by amount, by priority, in a couple of different buckets. It's development parts that I want to do in city maintenance.
I'm sorry, Don, you broke up there.
I'd like to see a list of your projects by description and amount that backs this up. It says, this is the thing I want to do in the next year. These are the projects that I have to do. These are the projects I'd like to do.
Okay, well, they're pretty much in here, so I can do it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Motion to
I second the motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.